So good morning, students. Today we'll continue the discussion on John Locke. In the last class, we had discussed John Locke's ideas on the state of nature. Now, we discussed in the last class that John Locke's ideas on state of nature are an outcome of his ideas on human nature. Okay, so the derivation of human nature resulted in his concept of state of nature. Now, we discussed in the last class that John Locke proposes that human nature is characterized by enlightened self-interest. It means individuals have an idea of what their self-interest or where their self-interest lies. And apart from that, they also are guided by what John Locke calls as the law of nature, which according to him is reason. And this law of nature, according to John Locke, guides every individual to understand the commonality of interests. Okay, the commonality of interest is that we want others to respect our life, our liberty, and our possessions. In the same way, we also would understand that to protect our rights, natural rights, we require to respect the natural rights of others. Right? Now, this makes individuals reasonable. Okay, this makes individual employ reason to understand that, lest you want your rights to be protected and safeguarded, you require to respect and also acknowledge the rights of another. It is this idea that John Locke says guides human actions. And this is what is called as enlightened self-interest. So man is guided by self-interest. He is also enlightened by the fact that, he also requires to respect the rights of others. Okay. Now this John Locke calls as the law of the nature. Okay. He calls this as reason. Right. And because of this human nature, human nature is governed by the passion as well as reason. Right. It is not singularly passion or gratification of individuals' appetites that guides human actions. So man's actions are guided both by passion as well as reason. Okay. And this human nature creates a state of nature which, according to John Locke, is characterized by freedom. Okay, but their rights, which are called as natural, individuals also understand the limits of their actions. Okay, therefore, the state of nature, according to John Locke, is a state of liberty, but not a state of license. Men are not free to do whatever pleases them. Okay, now, according to John Locke, this state of nature also has a natural law or the law of nature. Okay, which John Locke calls is reason, as we just discussed a few minutes earlier. Okay, and which compels each individual to respect and acknowledge the rights of others, just as he wants others to respect and acknowledge his rights. This is called as law of nature. So in the state of nature, we have what John Locke calls as the law of nature, right? And secondly, according to John Locke, the state of nature is pre-political. It is pre-political. But it is not pre-social. It is not pre-social. Because men have social interaction. Men are guided by mutual sympathies, understanding, accommodation. Men recognize and acknowledge each other's natural rights. So there is mutual cooperation, right? Therefore, men have organized into society and established social relations. Men are cooperating, men are accommodating each other's self-interests, and also men have realized the commonality of self-interests. Okay? Therefore, according to John Locke, there is a society. There is a society. But there was no political authority. Okay? So people have established social relations and social interactions. People have established certain norms which are, based on law of nature. Okay? So there was society. That's the reason why John Locke insists that the state of nature is only pre-political but not pre-social, because though there was a society, there was no authority for recognition of laws formally and Also, there is no formal authority for enforcement of these laws. Therefore, the state of nature according to John Locke is pre-political, but it was not pre-social. Okay. Now, as I told you in the last class, the primary intention behind John Locke's separation between society and state is to ensure that the state does not enforce or impose itself on society. John Locke wants to ensure that the state does not impose or enforce itself on society. And that's the reason why he insists that society was prior to state. And state itself was born out of society. And therefore, state cannot override or superimpose itself on the society. Now, this was another idea about the state of nature proposed by John Locke. Right. Next, in the state of nature, John Locke proposes that men enjoyed what he calls as natural rights. We'll elaborate on these natural rights very soon. Okay. But John Locke also believes that in the state of nature, men have enjoyed natural rights. Okay. So these rights, according to John Locke, include right to life, liberty, and right to estate or possessions. Okay, so whatever man had created, which is of some value, using his labor or using his industry and endeavor, is his possession. Okay, or is his estate. And John Locke believes that together, all the three are what he calls as property of an individual. Okay, his life is his property, his liberty is his property, and whatever the possessions or estate that he had created, mixing his labor with the resources offered by nature, are his possessions and his estate. And all the three are the property of individuals proper. And the state has no right to violate these. Why? Because these are granted by nature. They are natural rights. The state is not the source or the progenitor of these rights. The state is only a protector of these rights. Okay. So this is how John Locke picturized a state of nature. He considers that the state of nature is a state of relative calm and peace, unlike the kind of state of nature proposed by Thomas Hobbes, which was a state of continuous warfare of each against all and all against each. Now, that was not the kind of state of nature which John Locke was proposing. He was proposing a state of nature which was relatively more peaceful. But according to John Locke, the peace in the state of nature was an uneasy peace. It was a precarious peace. Okay? It was an unstable peace. Why? Because every individual had interpreted the natural law according to his own requirements, according to his own understanding. So every individual began to interpret natural law according to his own convenience, rather. Okay, and we are all very good advocates of our case, but very bad judges of our case. Isn't it? So the absence of a formal authority for recognizing natural rights, the absence of a formal authority for determining the content of laws, the absence of a formal authority for enforcement of these laws, an absence of a common authority for adjudication of disputes related to interpretation of these laws were the inconveniences which the state of nature presented before man. It was these inconveniences which prompted men to enter into a social contract. Okay. Now, according to John Locke, the state of nature, which was a state of relative peace, had the potential of degenerating into a state of warfare. Okay. And men are fearful of the evil rather than the prospect of good. If the prospect of good and the fear of evil are put in two different scales, men are more motivated by the fear of evil rather than the prospect of good. That propels men to enter into a social contract. Okay. So men, therefore, have entered into a social contract to come out of this state of nature. Okay. Now, unlike Thomas Hobbes, who had proposed a single contract which had created both the state and society at the same time, John Locke, on the other hand, proposes a different type of contract. Okay. Now we look at the type of contract and the implications that this contract has in formation of civil society and state. Nature of social contract. The nature of social contract. So what is the kind of social contract which John Locke was proposing? As I told you, John Locke had very, very clearly identified objectives. He had very clearly identified objectives. Yes, of course, like Thomas Hobbes had. For Thomas Hobbes, the most important objective was to realize order, to ensure security for individuals. Now, that was the purpose for which individuals have entered into a contract, according to Thomas Hobbes. John Locke, similarly, also had very clearly identified objectives.